So, Berto, I have a number of things to talk with you about the podcast. But first, let's introduce the podcasts that I want to talk about. This is Psychology in Seattle. And you are wearing a shirt, and I'm going to give you this mug.
New mug. Ooh.
This Psychology in Seattle mug.
Nice. Classic blue. I love it.
Classic sky blue.
Sky blue.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. It matches your shirt that you're wearing.
It does.
And I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I manufacture polka-dotted vegetables.
So, this first email, so to speak, is from long-term patron Anna, and she responded to our poems that we wrote.
Oh, yeah, the GPT poems?
Yeah, well, mine was GPT, and yours was rapping.
Yeah.
So long-term patron Anna did the same, and here is that poem.
Okay.
In the realm of thoughts, emotions sway. Psychology in Seattle lights the way.
Ooh.
With wisdom deep and insights bright, their podcast guides through day and night. A poem shared, a gift bestowed, in gratitude my heart has flowed. For lessons learned, for minds unfurled, I thank you with the entire world.
Oh.
To Dr. Kirk and his team so kind, for sparking thoughts within the mind. For every word, for every line, grateful hearts forever entwined. So here's my thanks, sincere and true, for all you do, for all you brew. In the world of psychology, you shine so bright. Thank you, Psychology in Seattle, for your guiding light. Much love from Ireland, long-term patron Anna and ChatGPT.
Yay.
Yeah. So I also want to finalize the Humberto-themed merch.
Ooh.
I have been working on this for months, and I started to poll the listeners, and I got a lot of great ideas. But I thought I would start with the runner-ups, or the runners-up?
Runners-up. Runner-ups.
I think it'd be runners-up.
Attorney generals.
Attorneys general. So these are runner-ups. It's patron and YouTube member Fema, good old Fema, had a suggestion of having mugs and stickers with Humberto's face. Okay. And I consider that heavily, but once I get to what I decided, you'll understand why I decided that one would be the winner. YouTube member Cutie Rain said, make a t-shirt with Humberto making non-existent jobs essential since 2018. That's pretty good, right?
I love it.
I mean, it really should be 2008, but good old Jocelyn G, she says, list all of his fake jobs in tiny print on the back, and on the front right, ask me what I do for work, and then have a picture of sunglasses with rose in mouth of Berto.
Wait, so like nothing on the back?
I know, right?
That's weird. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like an empty back. Some people don't like writing on the back. I get that.
Yeah. Or I guess maybe the listeners would make up fake jobs for you.
Oh, sure. They could imagine what I would have done instead of my job.
Yeah, that was confusing. Emily from Glasgow, Scotland says, something unique and a little eccentric, like a bedazzled jacket.
Ooh.
Or fingerless gloves, or maybe colorful socks. So I'd love to do that, but on the merch site, that isn't an option. They don't have bedazzled jackets or fingerless gloves.
No $3,000 bedazzled. Oh, that should be my merch. $3,000 bedazzled jackets.
Only one person, or no one would ever buy it. Just be sitting there. Okay, so what I decided to go with was, I don't know if it was a suggestion, but at the very least, the idea is that we would have a picture of you, like, so imagine the t-shirt. It's the picture, your cameo.
My cameo picture. I love it.
Which a number of people suggested.
Yeah.
They just thought that picture was just hilariously you, ridiculous, cringy, all the above.
Yes.
And so we'd have that. And it's copyrighted, it's not like something that someone else made. You made it, right?
Right.
And then there would be a bunch of things that, sayings and other kind of things that we can attribute to you. So then I asked specifically, what phrases or themes have you picked up from Humberto over the years? Which I wouldn't have thought that it would produce so many interesting things.
Really?
Yeah, there were things on this list where a lot of people said that I thought, I don't notice that. But, I wouldn't necessarily notice little verbal quirks that you have.
Sure.
Because we're just talking. It's just interesting to think that there are people that, because I do this too. When I listen to podcasts, I'll be like, oh, there's that phrase again.
Sure, yeah.
And so here are the things.
Okay, let's hear it.
YouTube member Cutie Rain suggested this, and this isn't something you've said a lot, of course,
Sure.
but
It could just be something that stood out.
yeah. Hello, my name is Humberto Castaneda, and I drive self-driving cars.
That'd be bizarre to say.
I know. So the rest of these are like frequent things.
Okay.
Upper tier patron Hannah from Indiana. She suggested, did you lift the flap?
Did you lift the flap?
Patron Sahana says, tangent time.
Oh, nice.
Patron Sue said, look, here's the point. So
Look, here's the point.
when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, he does say that, but I would never have
Yeah.
identified
And I
that.
say variants of it too. Like my point is,
Well, we'll get to think. We'll get to that. Another is patron Gabby kind of inspired this one. So I bought a red leather jacket. Emily from Glasgow, Scotland says, exactly, absolutely, 1,000%.
exactly, absolutely, 1,000%.
Emily also suggested, I'm not an expert, but I'm just saying.
I'm not an expert. I'm just saying.
Sterling says, I grow on people.
I do grow on people, kind of like a fungus.
Yeah. Patron Jew suggested OPP.
Oh, baby.
Rosie suggested, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I love that. It's so funny. You're right. I wouldn't have thought of these, but I wouldn't have necessarily thought of these.
Here's my suggestion is, don't judge me. I bought a Porsche.
Don't judge me. I bought a Porsche.
Patron and YouTube member Fema, good old Fema, suggested just the word gal.
Gal.
Yeah.
Oh, it was better than female. Gal.
Because Fema says, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else use that word.
Really?
Gal.
Gal.
Yeah. And then Fema also suggested, no. Wait.
No. Wait.
Anonymous annual patron from Los Angeles suggested, and things like this.
And things like this.
Yeah. I think it's more like, and things like this.
And things like this. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I wouldn't have been able to pull that one out.
Yeah.
But so there are a number of other things that people suggested, all by Jocelyn, by the way. And I trust Jocelyn because she, is pretty perceptive and in contact with us a lot. So tell me if you know where these come from.
Okay.
The soap patting, like patting with your hand, patting, the soap patting.
The soap patting.
Does that ring a bell?
The soap patting.
She also says his work on being more present in the moment. Oh,
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, you could. I mean, I certainly have talked about that a billion. I've certainly talked about that a billion times about through therapy, learning to be present and feeling myself.
Right. What would be a phrase that typifies that? My therapist said.
Yeah. So my therapist. Yeah. So my therapist would say.
My therapist.
That's
say,
definitely a thing. And then specifically about the presence thing would be like, what are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
Or another one would have been, what's that? What's that thing you're doing with your hands? Or what? I notice you're rubbing your chest. What's that about? That was literally. Oh my gosh, that would happen quite a bit. I'd be like doing this, kind of self-comforting, and she literally would be like, "I notice you're kind of rubbing your chest. What's that about?"
That's good. My therapist would say, "What's that thing you're doing with your hands?" It works on a number of levels. And then she also said that pick something that you are pedantic about or nerdy about or something.
Oh,
I guess you got to have some sort of
episode 1.
Yeah, you got to have some sort of Star Wars thing in here.
Episode 1, more like episode none.
Like what would be a frequent phrase?
There's only 3 Star Wars movies.
Okay.
Like which of the?
Well, what about like Like you don't like people who like episode 1 through 3 or something.
All right. Something I would say all the time, which you'll remember, is you would say something about episode. I'm like, what's episode 1? You know, or like I'd say like, what's that? Like literally would question its existence.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if you were to say something condemning of people who liked it, what would be a phrase?
Misa no like this.
Oh, that's good. Misa
no like
those movies.
Those are movies.
Those movies. Misa no like episode 1 or something. Okay.
I think those movies is great because it does you don't even have to specify because you know what the Misa part is.
Right.
So yeah.
So I'm finalizing it, and I'm gonna ask Stacy to design it now, and it will be that picture and probably like that. You know, my name is Humberto Castaneda, and then there's gonna be a bunch of these sentences floating around, maybe like a bunch of thought bubbles or you know.
And you could add in there if you don't already have it. You deserve it because that's the one that I always add at the end.
Okay, good.
Which people could misinterpret, like, what do I deserve?
So I also asked on this survey that I sent out if people would like to say anything to you. So I just thought I'd read a sampling. And certainly this is not all of the things that people said.
Yeah.
And some of them I, for some reason, didn't know who sent it. Maybe it was anonymous. Someone said, "You are such a talented guy. Great singing voice, intelligent thinker, and funny."
Aw, thank you.
Another person. "I only filled out the survey to tell you how much I appreciate you sharing so much.
Oh, yes.
Being vulnerable and real. You are great."
Thank you.
Another person, Laura, says, "Bertle, almost every episode I want to tell you, you are hilarious and amazing, and you contribute so much to the show. And it's always clear to me that you are a good person and even a humble person at heart. I think people misunderstand you easily, but I appreciate your opinions and your boldness.
That's right.
You make me laugh so much, even when Kirk doesn't laugh, which is often LOL. And by the way, I just want to chime in here. So I have this sort of sense of humor where you don't necessarily acknowledge, like, I consider it a high compliment if when you and I are joking around, when you and I joke, the other person doesn't skip a beat and just continues to riff.
Oh, I love when that happens because you do that well because I'll say something, you're like, either you'll say something that makes it clear you got it, but we've moved on, or you'll say like, say some like good one or whatever, or like just a very brief thing.
Yeah.
And it's great.
I mean, occasionally you will get a zinger.
Every now and then you say like, okay, that's one of the best ones you've had.
That'll literally cause an involuntary belly laugh for me. And I'm not saying those are the good ones. I'm just saying that you and I and other people like us have this sort of banter and sense of humor that it's considered a compliment to yes and or play along with.
Yeah. Plus, oftentimes I try to inject things really quickly just as an Easter egg almost.
Yeah.
And it's even better if it's like not quite acknowledged.
Yeah. Now, maybe like 10% of it is that I'm on a roll usually and you're just sneaking something in. And if I stop, it'll get
derailed.
Yeah, I'll get derailed. But yeah, sometimes I listen to our episodes and I worry that people think I don't think you're funny or that I don't appreciate it. I wouldn't leave it in if I didn't appreciate it, which does happen sometimes, by the way.
Yeah.
But if it's in, then I'm saying I think it's funny and I think it's so funny and I respect your humor so much that I'll be damned if I'm going to laugh at it.
I love it.
But she also says, your lighthearted energy is a crucial ingredient to the podcast, and I appreciate you. Also, you're doing a killer job on the neo-Nazi episodes.
Right.
I'm loving your leadership. Sincerely, Berto fan, Laura.
Wow, thank you.
Patron Chris says, at the start, I really didn't like him because his phrasing is much different than other professionals on the podcast. But now he is my favorite guest
Aw.
because he provides the view of a person who has worked on himself but has no official academic knowledge.
That's true.
I like how these nice things, there's like, I think people don't like you very much, or at first I really hated you.
Yeah, I know. It's like, at first I hated you, but the fact that you have zero academic knowledge has ingratiated you to me.
Yeah, when we were younger, me and my friends would have this inside joke where we would say to other people and ourselves, we'd say, "I don't care what other people say.
know, right?
I don't care what other people say. You're a really great person."
I do that. I just did that to my brother the other night. I'm like, man, I don't care what mom says. Because we always have that. She's my mom. No, she's my mom.
Kwan just simply said, "I like Berto." Rosie said,
Nice.
"I'm not saying you're a conspiracy theorist, but you sometimes give off that energy in a good way." Smiley face.
Well,
What do you think that means?
That's interesting. Wait, what was her name?
Rosie.
Rosie?
No, why?
Oh, why? Why is a question we should ask.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to this. I'm going to have to get to the bottom of it.
But seriously, what is this referring to?
Well, because I get excited about things. I might have but I might tell little weird anecdotes or something I read, trigger other thoughts. And that is generally how Charlie Day would approach his,
Yeah. But I don't think you're anything close to being susceptible or a proponent of any sort of conspiracy theory.
Not generally,
I
no.
think you're at the other end of the spectrum.
But I give off the vibe that I could be.
Yeah, I think that's true. Anonymous says, "Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing about your medical struggles.
Yes.
I'm glad you are getting medical care and taking care of yourself."
Oh, yes, thank you.
Patron Jew says, "The episodes with you are my favorite.
Aw.
You bring such lightness to the often heavy subjects."
Yeah.
Sterling says, and this is the last one, "Thanks for all you do. I've had many laughs, heartwarming moments, and moments of insight thanks to you."
Oh, thank you to you for thanking me.
So soon we'll have merch for Berto's face, and you'd be able to get it on a shirt, on a mug, on a sticker, on a poster, probably on an iPhone case, maybe. I don't know. We'll
Will
see.
there be one bubble that says in all caps, Berto, exclamation mark, question mark?
Now, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Stacy is the designer. She understands how all these things work, and I'm worried as I say this that to really reproduce that photo of you, it has to involve a lot of colors, which I'm not sure if that's possible, but we'll see. We'll figure something out. But I like the idea of having a lot of random things that you tend to say,
Yep.
because I think that would really shine your personality. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, let's get into some emails. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, so speaking of Berto, let's do OPP. What do you say?
OPP.
These people became patrons all the way back in 2021 and have stayed patrons through thick and thin.
Whoa.
We have Victoria from Cranston, Rhode Island.
Woo.
We have Valerie from Irvine, California.
Nice.
We have Wendy from Meridian, Idaho.
Huh.
We have Jovel from Miami, Florida.
Oh, Miami. So
We
hot.
have Kate from Little Rock, Arkansas. We have Kendra from Springboro, Ohio.
Okay.
Anna from Conroe, Texas. Emily from Redlands, California. Wudasi from Sterling, Virginia. Natalie from Denton, Texas. TL from Olympia, Washington. Good old Olympia.
Whoa.
We have Charisse from Titusville, Florida. Michaela from Taunton, Mass. Toffee Tomb from Cupertino, California.
Oh, so many.
It's named after the font that town.
The font is named after the town.
I know. I'm making a joke.
Oh, I see. Funny man, Dr.
It's one of those moments where Caitlin, maybe, from Odenton, Maryland. Big Al from Philly. Tara from Oakland. Caitlin from Seattle. Jackie from Flagstaff. Casey from Greenwood, Missouri. Ruben from Madison, Wisconsin. Sumaya from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Kate from Wake Forest, North Carolina.
I thought you were going to say, wait for it.
Wake Forest is where one of the big North Carolina universities is from, I think.
Oh.
Anyway, or there's a Wake Forest University. Anyway,
Okay.
Robin from Fort Worth, Texas. Andrea from Burlingame, California. Anna from Austin, Texas. Monique from Copake, New York. Rebecca from Olympia, Washington. Seaboop from Aptos, California. Isn't there also
a lot of California?
Isn't there also a font Aptos? APTOS?
I don't know.
Anyway, Megan from Boonville, New York, and Dr. X from Pittsburgh, PA.
Oh, thank you, patrons.
Yeah.
My roommate, one of our roommates, my fourth year of college, was from Pittsburgh. He was older than us. Dave, Schoon, Eric, myself. Dave moved out, and this guy moved in.
Was he Dr. X?
It might have been Dr. X.
All right, this next email is from middle tier patron Rachel from Maryland. She says, Dr. Kirk and Humberto, it's the middle of the night in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and I just had a dream that I was hanging out with you and Humberto.
Woo!
It was awesome.
Nice.
I'm happy to give you more details about the dream if you are interested, but as a therapist myself, I know listening to other people's dreams can be a snooze fest. By the way, I don't agree with that. I like, especially if it's narcissistically about me. But Berto, what do you think the dream was about?
Well, so first of all, slight anecdote. I were you there when I arrived late to the movie and I'm gonna go sit down and Mitch is there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta tell you about the craziest dream.
I haven't seen Mitch in a long time.
Okay, this is a long time ago, but I was like, I have to tell you about the craziest dream I had, and Mitch goes, who cares? Just like purposely being a jerk.
I might have been.
But then I was like, well, and he's like, but then we actually got in a debate as to whether or not dreams are interesting. And he's like, well, I just don't care about other people's dreams. I happen to find dream conversations interesting.
It depends, right? Because if it's brief and it does have some interest to it, then it can be interesting. But
Yeah.
if you just grab a random person's account of a dream, it's interesting to the dreamer, but typically not to other people. Because the dreamer had those experiences. They're like, and then I was in the thing, but as a viewer or as a listener, anyway. But what do you think her dream was?
Okay.
Middle tier patron Rachel
This
from
one's
Maryland.
easy.
Given what you know about her, your intimate knowledge of her, and given that she's in United UAE.
Well, this one's easy.
Okay.
Obviously, what happened is she was in the middle of a session with a
Because
client.
you and I were in the dream.
Yeah, I know. She was in the middle of a session with a client, and the client was trying to tell her a dream.
Ooh.
And she was
Inception.
kind of starting to like fall asleep a little bit when all of a sudden one of the windows just bursts, glass flying everywhere. Unfortunately, a couple of the pieces actually landed on the client, which is not cool. Don't endorse that part. But it was you on the outside had accidentally thrown a baseball through the window because you were trying to show me how to throw a ball. Because my dad and I never played catch, and you're like, oh, let's play catch. I'll be your father.
I think we're entering your mindscape right
And
now.
so I'm like, all right. But then you get a little too overzealous, and I get afraid of your throw, so I duck, and the ball goes right through the window. And we're like we're all shameful and embarrassed and guilty ridden. And so we go knock on the door. She opens the door. She's like, guys, oh my God, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. But in the dream, we're not podcasters.
Yeah.
We're like, well, sorry, man. We don't know what you're talking
I have a
about.
very crucial question based on my dreams.
Yeah.
Do I have pants on?
You not only have pants, you have MC Hammer pants.
Okay, that's good. I don't care. As long as I have pants.
I, on the other hand, I'm wearing a leotard. It's a little interesting. But anyways, she's like, no, you guys have a podcast. And she's trying to convince us that we have a podcast. And you and I are like, no, we're just friends. He's teaching me how to throw a ball. But that sounds odd. So we go out on the town. We all get hammered on hookah. And by the end of the night, we decide to start a podcast together. And it's the three of us. And we're all talking. It's all dreams. It's called Dream Talk. Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Inception. Well, Rachel, fascinating dream. But in all seriousness, yeah, send us your dream. And if any of y'all have a dream, I have dreams about parasocial relationships I have. It's not creepy. People are always worried. I don't want to creep Kirk out. Look, having a dream about me doesn't mean I'm worried you're going to kill me. There's quite a leap there, And I don't watch silly horror movies, so I don't have that kind of indoctrination. But anyway, going on with her email, it got me thinking, have you ever considered the additional income of giving fans a paid opportunity to come to Seattle and have lunch with you? So chiming in, she's saying she had a dream, and maybe it was like, oh, that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to actually just have lunch? Maybe that was the dream.
Yeah.
Going on. I'm a bit sheepish to say that I am privileged enough, or actually, she says, I'm a privileged asshole and would be willing to pay several $1,000s for that opportunity. I can't be the only one that wants this. I'd be willing to do all the background checks and everything. I am generally a nice person, and I'm a not scary person. Or if it sounds like an awkward, worst nightmare kind of thing for you to meet fans, I feel that. Berto, what do you think about that?
Actually, she could be one of my earlier customers. I just started a side business where what I do is I actually show up in people's dreams, in the deepest part of their dreams, the ones that they don't remember, but they're the best part for your brain and stuff. I charge a very reasonable fee. A few thousand sounds great. I will show up in her dreams on occasion.
And you won't remember it because it's in the
yeah. Well, she sometimes might remember it, but just know that I'll be there.
Yeah. So first off, Rachel, I actually really love meeting the listeners. It grounds me so that when I'm making content, I can feel people's presence. I don't like not having individual humans, personalities with a face and a life and all the things that come with a human being. I don't like not having at least some knowledge of some of the individuals. And so I actually really like meeting listeners. And one of the top 3 moments of my life maybe was when we had our first live show, Berto, you and me.
Oh
and
my gosh.
We, as a part of that, a big part of the enjoyment was interacting with a lot of
it was mind blowing.
the fans, and I don't know, maybe 10 people flew in. I would say half of the people that were there as actual fans, or maybe a third, flew from very far away.
Including Ireland.
Yeah. Lyndon flew out from Ireland.
Yes.
People flew from all...
It was insane. Insane.
And so, but it wasn't just that. It was... because we did a lot of crowd work.
Right.
We had volunteers, and then we had an after party kind of thing, and we were interacting with everybody, and it just felt so mind-blowing because before that we had emails and stuff, but we'd never really met. No. We'd never had a Zoom meeting or anything.
Didn't feel real.
Yeah, and to actually meet people and to hear them talk about how they enjoy the podcast, it was truly mind-blowing.
The closest I had felt is when you used to have end of quarter get-togethers with some of the students from the university. Mm-hmm. That some of them were listeners, and so that felt a little bit like that.
Yeah. But
it was like, okay, but they're also at the university and stuff.
Yeah.
This was like legit, like, whoa, you guys just listen?
Right. Yeah. So about charging a lot of money, I don't think I would want to do that because it would feel extremely exclusionary to 99.9% of listeners, or literally everybody except for you, Rachel. But on the other hand, not that this would change my mind, but when I thought about it earlier, there are a lot of famous people that do this.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, the Cameo is a way of doing that. No,
yeah, but like
in a more democratic way, I suppose.
Beyonce was paid $2 million to perform for the Gaddafi family, which is a talked about thing that happened in the media.
Yeeks.
Now she, after the backlash or after discovering it was the Gaddafi family, donated all the money.
Okay.
But that just says that Beyonce occasionally does private shows for $2 million or more, right? J-Lo, $1.5 million to sing for a political leader in the Middle East who was accused of major human rights violations. Again, those are the ones that just bubble up because they're more controversial.
Yeah, and the key is like there are different levels here that we're discussing. But I honestly think that the best and only solution is if they fly me out there to UAE, I can discuss all the reasons why it wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah, so I wouldn't do it for the reason I wouldn't want to be exclusionary. Also, it just feels like beyond a certain level of narcissism that I want to engage in.
Come at me and pay me.
Yeah, I mean, even if people would pay it, and I guess come to think of it, if someone paid a fair amount of money, I would feel tremendous pressure to be some sort of godlike figure when they finally met me, So that's not something that I would do.
You could kiss the ring.
And I have some experience with this to some extent because I used to offer consultation over the phone for maybe a couple $100. I think I was just charging my regular fee because I would get a lot of requests along that. And I was like, well, I do have a private practice and a consultation practice, and therapists will hire me for a couple $100 an hour. And why not, I guess, extend that to the public at large, It wasn't very frequent that people would want that, but the times that they did, a lot of the times it was really awkward.
Oh, okay.
It was weird, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, why would you? I mean, people would call and set it up, and then they wouldn't really have any questions. I think in their head they had a fantasy that I would just like know what they wanted me to talk about, because typically they're listening to me yammer. They just didn't have any questions really. And this wasn't everybody, but I stopped that because one, I didn't really have time,
right?
And two, it always felt really, or not always. I'd say about half the time it just felt like really arduous, and I started to feel kind of like a trained monkey, like dance monkey. I'm calling. I paid money, and I'm calling you now. Entertain me. They didn't have any prompts. They didn't say, explain this concept to me, or
right.
There's a situation I'm dealing with. And it just felt really not my zone, even though arguably I made a lot more money per hour doing that sort of thing, but I have the luxury of not having to worry about that too much. And also there are lines that I don't care how much I get paid. I just don't want to do it.
I guess the way I would do it is I would show up, collect the money, say, it's not feeling right. Sorry. Next time it'll be better, and I bolt.
But the question is, do you have pants on?
Leotard?
Now, I don't think, Rachel, you're going to be some sort of weirdo or someone that wouldn't be interesting to talk to. I'm not saying that at all. But the thing is that there's no way to screen for that effectively, I think. Yeah. Most of the time when we would have live events and meet people, 97% of the time, everyone was wonderful. But 3% of the time, the people we would meet in person, there would be some kind of discomfort, some kind of issue. I'm not going to go into details.
Of course not, yeah.
But there were, some situations that were potentially extremely disastrous, honestly. Yeah. And if I was a regular performer, I guess, I would get on stage and walk away. But I can't do that. I feel morally like at least somewhat responsible. And so I don't know if I want to risk that 3%.
Well, the way that, so podcasters or famous people that end up doing actual real life events with fans and stuff, usually then you actually go through like some company that organizes these kinds of things, and there's insurance and there's some regulations and things, and people sign up. There's some gates. It doesn't mean bad stuff can't happen, but when we were doing it, it was really like, come, just show up.
Yeah.
We didn't have any.
And I was in charge of literally everything.
Yeah.
So from the microphones to the venue to the seats, I mean, I literally organized the seats in the room. Yeah, we could hire someone, and I think that might be doable. I'm not saying
go to Comic-Con.
Maybe
we should have a booth at Comic-Con.
So I'm not saying we won't have a live event, but anyway, I sometimes have thoughts about having in-person seminars, to have like a deep dive on attachment or something.
Sure.
But the logistics are kind of daunting, and I also kind of worry about that 3%, and I also worry about people worshiping me in person, which I don't want that to happen.
We should just do a tour. Basically, we plan one tour. We're going to go perform some podcasting, play a couple songs, sign some T-shirts, and move.
Well, so with that, in the past, we were of a certain level of popularity and thus would have a certain number of people that would participate. and a certain number of people that would fly out. But at this point, we haven't had a live event in a long time. So if we had one now, particularly given this plateau of popularity, I think there would be a lot more people who would need to fly out that would want to. And I know it's stupid, but I would feel bad. And I always just think about it, I was like, I don't want to put people in that position, like if I could, you and I, Berto, would fly to them, and we would hang out with 4 of the people from Philly, and then 4 of the people from Miami or something.
You could imagine doing like like patron hangouts or something, like patron visits.
Maybe. Now, I did think, well, what about a casual meetup? Like, I just announce that tomorrow I'm going to have a little thing, and if people can make it, and I do it like every now and then people can't fly out because they don't have time. But a pretty small fraction of our listenership actually lives within driving distance of Seattle, so that seems like a really limiting kind of thing. I don't know, but sometimes I think about that just to say, hey, I do. It's sort of a win-win, and it's a compromise, I suppose. Then I think about, well, what if we did like a Zoom meetup? Because, our live shows, when we do them on YouTube, it's kind of a one-way street. Yeah. I mean, there's comments, but it's not, you can't really have a conversation, right? But if we did a Zoom thing, then we do that. But as a podcast listener myself, I've participated in some of those, and they're always particularly lackluster. Really. Have you ever done these things before?
I haven't, but I've seen videos on YouTube of those things, and they're chaotic.
Right.
It's kind of hard to, like, everyone's talking and people, sorry, what? And it's just like, yeah.
And what can tend to happen is that, let's say there's 100 people, 100 listeners, and you say, okay, who wants to ask, or who wants to have a conversation with us? The 1 out of 100 people that is first to step forward is likely a very talkative sort of person. Which is great.
Question 1A, part A.
and so, not always, of course, but sometimes it can, as a participant in these meetings, or these like parasocial sort of Zoom meetings, I have, like, I did one recently, I signed up and participated in one recently, and after about, 20 minutes of one particular participant just dominating everything, I just X'd out because it just felt so like disjointed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not saying that our listeners would do that, but again, if you have 1,000 people on Zoom and one of them is going to do that, then there's this risk. I guess I like the zone that we're in, where we make this sort of content and the way that we do. We do lives and chats and stuff. And I have that down to a science. And these kind of events, because I've done these before, even the anniversary events that we do, it requires from me so much upfront prep for one thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas I am making, sometimes 20 episodes a week. So I'm spending basically an entire year putting effort into one of those episodes in a way. You know what I mean? And it just feels like if I'm going to spend my limited time at work, I want to really deliver the goods that people really want, which is deep dives and better content, more researched content, new content, So if I had, in a perfect world, I would have all the time in the world and I would do that kind of thing. And so it always just tends to, whenever it comes up and I really want to do it, then I just kind of say, well, I don't know, I'll think about it later. The pandemic really put an end to our live events in that way, and I just never picked the motivation back up again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What I'm imagining is a service that any one of these Cameo, Zooms, any one of these could do, which is essentially a live meet and greet queue system where we say, okay, every month, once a month, we're going to do 6 hours or maybe 4 hours, whatever, of meet and greet. But it's not all the same people for the 6 hours. It's a queue. You join the queue, and then there's an automatic timer, so it's not even us kicking them out. So like, oh, you get 1 minute, oh, how's it going? What's your name? Whatever.
Or 5 minutes. Or
5 minutes. Whatever. And then you cycle through. And then there's fun little effects, fun things you can trigger.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that. That's doable, right?
Yeah.
The idea I had related to that was that we would have a live event, like a picnic, and I was like, well, but then I would want to actually, it's kind of like a wedding. You want to walk around and acknowledge everybody and have a conversation.
You come to my daughter's wedding.
And like The Godfather, what I would need to do is there would have to be some limits on how long,
right?
Because, if someone comes up and other people are being shy and they don't want to come up, like you'd have to tell someone like, okay, it's time, your time's up.
Yeah.
And that feels weird too. But the Zoom idea I like, Bert. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Like you could,
especially if it's a system that we are not controlling, it's just part of the system.
Yeah.
Like think about it with Cameo, there's so many things in place where even if you wanted to, the system doesn't support. So you have, like, well, okay, it's got certain limits. You can do this, you can't do that. Similarly, in this thing I'm imagining, no one would be like, oh, but I wish we had You just don't. It's 5 minutes. That's what it is.
Right. And we're not kicking anyone out.
No.
It's just
a system. It's
an automatic system. Yeah.
And we're not managing the queue, because the other thing is, like, we could technically do this ourselves, but then we are the ones kicking out.
Right.
We have to manage the queue. We have to do a lot of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could have a producer that did this for us, and then we don't have the let someone into the room versus kick someone out. They're doing all that, and we're just hapless participants,
Yep.
But that would be an approximation. They wouldn't have to fly out. They wouldn't really even have to pay anything, right?
Well, I still want the thousands of dollars I was promised.
Okay, let's take a break, and we get back. There's another question about podcasting. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, Berto. So let's do another OPP. What do you say?
OPP.
There's so many OPPs that I want to do that I've been neglecting.
Wow.
And I just want to kind of do a bunch right now. These are people that became patrons in 2021 and are still patrons. We
a
have
lot of 2021s.
Katie from Cincinnati, Alex from Federal Way, Washington.
Oh my gosh. Right.
Megan from Bellingham, Washington. Marina from Hillsboro, Oregon. Colin from Gaylord, Michigan. Hannah from St. Louis, Missouri. Monique from Hilo, Hawaii. I've been there. It's nice.
Nice.
Sonia from Sun Valley, California. Julie from Enumclaw, Washington. Noelle from Inglewood, Colorado. Krista from New Orleans. Anya from Milwaukee, Oregon. That's funny.
What?
Anna from Spanaway, Washington. Kelly from Seattle. Julie from Peachtree Corners, Georgia. That sounds nice. Camilla from Cibolo, Texas. May from Iowa. Noelle from Albuquerque. Jessica from Tacoma, Washington.
Nice.
Joy from Durham, North Carolina. Emily from Seattle. Blizzard Girl from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. Kathy from Rochester, New York. Serena from Northville, Michigan. Bridget from Minneapolis. Natalie from Seattle. There's a few Seattle people here.
Wow.
Alina from Hawthorne Woods, Illinois. Caroline from Lexington, South Carolina. Debbie from St. Louis, Missouri. And Lee from Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice.
Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron all of this time. So this next email, Berto, is from middle tier patron Jocelyn G. Good old Jocelyn G. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Berto. One could think of you two as influencers. Do you think of yourself as an influencer, Berto?"
Well, in the sense that the people that listen, especially longtime listeners, just like I am influenced by things that I listen to for a long time, sure. But I don't think of myself as a, quote, influencer.
Yeah, I think the definition of influencers has morphed over time, but I would much more call ourselves content providers as the general term.
Yeah.
So Jocelyn says, but I would also consider you to be quite influenceable by your community and patrons and listeners.
Yeah, I think that's right. Actually, I totally agree with that.
Not only to drive the direction of your content, but also to have inside jokes, take suggestions for movies to watch, etc. Have you always been comfortable being influenced and guided by your audience? How has this evolved from the start of your podcast until now? Has it been an organic journey, or did you have to work hard to remain open to all the thoughts and ideas of your audience end of email. I always like it when Jocelyn
email.
and a few others end their email with end of email. Berto, have we always been comfortable, or have we always been influenceable by the listeners? I mean, you don't really know this process because you don't really have your hands on the outlines and the topics, but you've
but I definitely, and we've even talked about whether or not I have moderated myself over the time. I would say obviously not the first longest period of time. I had zero connection to what the listeners were thinking because there's very few of them, and I didn't know what they were thinking. So no, not at first. But obviously talking about when we've had listeners and giving feedback and looking at YouTube comments and looking at iTunes comments, whatever. I myself, I mean, in some ways, obviously not in all ways, I'm not easily influenceable in the sense of like, if I have a strong opinion, someone disagrees with that, I'm not just going to be like, oh, someone disagreed, I'm going to change my opinion. But certainly there have been topics where I think, okay, maybe I should rethink some of this, or there's been, not all, but sometimes where some things that I've done might be offensive, so I'm like, oh, maybe I won't do that. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, yes.
Well, listening to reruns, I have noticed, and this is akin to what it's like as a therapist, that in the micro, it's hard to see change. You can watch a tree and it doesn't seem to be growing, but if you just take snapshots over the span of years, you could clearly see growth or change. And on the podcast, you have drastically changed some of your ideas, influenced by listeners and by me, I think, and vice versa.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Getting back to that thing that you brought up, I will tell the listeners where I came to, and then I was telling you this at our Oscar party. Again, I was listening to some reruns, and I found that in the past you had a boldness that carried with it some risk, but was really great, I thought. And I thought was entertaining and powerful and interesting. And you still have a lot of that boldness, but it seemed to me like a little bit less. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying that if the change has been because of worries of bothering people by being a little on the edge, of course that should be considered. And you've always considered that. You've never been completely unhinged. But I was wondering if the dial of concern had been cranked a little too high. And so I told you at the Oscar party that if that's true, feel free. You have a lot of wiggle room. You don't have to be as concerned about that. Plus, I'll take care of you. If you do something, I'll edit it out, or I'll tell you, or I'll run damage control with the comments. And as you heard from the survey, people really like you and appreciate your boldness and your courage. So we didn't get a chance to really get into it, but what do you think about all that?
I think there's a difference, though, because like one of the ways in which I was, quote, bold for the longest time during the first phases of this is, and this wasn't true just in the podcast, it's just that it was a chance for me to almost have a captive audience to my rants, is that I have strong opinions. And when I was younger, I tended to assume that when I had a strong opinion, my strong opinion trumped, pun not intended, other people, period.
Kind of like your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we were in an episode and you would say, let's say you might say something about like, well, but men find round things interesting. I might be like, well, duh, because we were cavemen and we saw circles and we wanted to have sex with them. And you're like, well, there might be more subtlety to it. Now, and to this day, I still feel like at the time, at least, sometimes you were a little too on the, I don't know, we can't tell anyone anything about it. There's no science. And I was a little too much in that, like, no, it's obvious. If you just look at a guy, it's clear that blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good summary of it. Yeah.
And that I would almost discount entirely environment, right? Like I'd be like, no, it's clear. It's a billion years of evolution. And that's just one example. There were many topics like that where I'd be like, no, this is my opinion and I'm just going to lay it out. And I think, the people that appreciated that didn't necessarily agree with me. They just appreciated that I was okay expressing my opinions.
And a lot of people agreed with you.
Right. The flip side is the things that I think I've kept steady and I still will do, and I think is me being comfortable enough to be like, here's some crazy thing I've done or some crazy struggle I've had, and it's kind of embarrassing, or it's kind of, and I feel terrible, or I really was a jerk, or I did a horrible thing. I'll still do that. The things I definitely have tamed a bit, but not all in the way, is I don't assume that my opinion is always the end of the story in all times.
That's good. And I think that's growth, and I think that's positive, and that's not the opposite of bold.
Yeah.
I think that you can still be, and I don't even know exactly if I know I can't put my finger on what would actually change, but we talk about comments on the YouTube videos that you're in and other kinds of things, and I know that it affects you more than you let on that it affects you. It might not affect you as much as it affects me, but it definitely affects you. And I've seen you get tentative temporarily at times. I don't think you're that way today, but it does happen. And I think you have a lot of love from the listeners and a lot of leeway, even if they don't agree with you. I think they will give you that grace if you put your foot in your mouth or you go a little far afield. It's not that I'm saying the change would be that you would start saying like offensive things.
No, of course not.
Because that's not even really what we're talking about in the past. But I think that, and today's energy actually feels kind of reminiscent of the old days. So maybe it's already taken its
I think it must oscillate as well. It also must vary by topic. For example, I think when we were doing some of the, not the Nazi one, but the couple of the deep dives beforehand, I don't know if there was a lot of stuff that I because it was just such horrible topics. Like these people did these horrible things and we're talking about it. So I don't know if there was much room for me to be like controversial statement or something.
Again, it's not controversy.
You're right. It's not about controversy.
It's just freedom to be you.
Yeah. Look, there are some things that have affected me that I'm so upset about because I've mentioned this before. There's two types of comments in like the comments that bug me. One of them bugs me superficially. The other one
hurt you?
Yeah, hurt me. One of them bugs me. The other one hurts me. The ones that bug me are like more along the lines of I say something. Maybe let's say we're talking about AI or something, and I say, "Oh, I think I know that right now the music you hear that AI generates is not great, but it will be in like 2 years." And maybe someone in the comments is like, "Oh, he's delusional. That's never gonna happen." That bugs me, but I'm like, whatever. It's just an opinion. But the one that I remember, one of the ones that really hurt and upset me. It was that episode with the dude that conned the woman or the women.
Tinder swindler?
Tinder swindler. Because I had said at the beginning of the episode, the thing, there was that gal who was like taken by...
There's that word, gal.
Gal, yeah. She was really taken by this guy, this billionaire that really... And I made the statement, I was like, oh, man, I just feel so unfair. Like my unvarnished opinion is that as I was watching the documentary, I felt this sense of unfairness. I'm like, well, how can you compete with that? Like this guy swoops out of nowhere. He's a billionaire. It's like, and man, I just got...
Well, so to be clear, and I, in the moment, even reacted from what you were saying.
Right.
I don't judge you for it. And I think this is a perfect example because it's not controversial per se, but it is your human reaction. And it does reflect your narcissism at times. Which isn't like pathological level, but you're looking at it from, because, that wasn't my reaction, but I'm in a different spot or whatever. But anyway, so, you're watching the Tinder swindler in the beginning, and there's this flashy guy who purports to have all this money and fame and airplanes and European je ne sais quoi. And there are these women around the world that are just like smitten by this guy, right? He has it all. He gave me a diamond bracelet and he took me on his private plane. And when you're watching it, you're just like, even though you're married, by the way,
Right.
happily married, you're watching it like, it's more of like, well, maybe even trauma of some sort, like your classism trauma when you're in your teenager. But the way you worded it was, I want to be with those sorts of women, and this rich guy's just gobbling them all up, and I'm being deprived.
No, sorry.
Well, that's the way it was interpreted.
Well, yeah, but that was explicitly not, because I was actually saying.
But that's the way it was interpreted. That's what I'm saying.
But I wasn't saying, I was saying, well, that's not fair, right? But the reason I was bringing it up wasn't, and that's the way I feel. I was saying, as I was watching it, initially, that was what was going through my mind.
Yeah, and in the moment, I was like, well, wait, so you were seeing it through your limited experience? Because, if that was a part of it, in the moment, I want to be clear, I was not judging you. I wasn't saying it was bad. It's interesting, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, because that sort of thing is what you bring to the podcast. You bring a humanity and all of the...
But that's the reason I was hurt and upset, because people didn't get that what I'm doing in that moment is I'm not trying to make that point.
Yeah.
I'm saying, here's how I felt while I was watching it. And then, of course, if you let me finish, then I realized, oh yeah, that's such a silly way to look at things.
even so,
right?
Even if you didn't have that prologue.
Because if someone in the comments had said, you shouldn't feel that way. Like that, you're valuable. Actually, many people did. Oh, it's too bad you feel that way. You're so valuable. Those don't upset me or hurt me. Those are fine. I just, in my mind, I'm like, you misinterpret what I'm getting at. I don't feel that way still. In the moment as I was watching, that thought went through my head, and I'm sharing it openly.
You feel misunderstood.
The one that hurts and upsets me are the people that attacked me for saying that.
Attacked you based on a misunderstanding.
Well, attacked me because I think a lot of people pretend that they have full control over all the thoughts that go through their brain, and that the only things that are real in their head are whatever they actually verbalize in the light of day to everyone, right? And I'm like, in my mind, it's like, no, listen, all of us watch any number of things, talk to people, whatever, and all sorts of horrible thoughts or good or bad thoughts go through our heads at all times. That doesn't make us bad people. It doesn't even make the fact that we might even espouse those thoughts that went through our head, that still doesn't make us bad people.
Yeah.
What makes us bad people is when we act on things that are bad in bad ways, right?
Right. But the internet doesn't account for that.
I know. But those are the kinds of comments where I'm like, well, you are lying to yourself and then accusing me. I'm not saying you had the same thought that I did in that moment, but you have all sorts of crazy, weird, inappropriate, bad, whatever thoughts at all times for a whole bunch of reasons. Mm-hmm. And if you were honest about that and then discussed it, you might grow as a result. Mm-hmm. And that's what really got me. It's like, anyways, that's just one example. But whenever there's something like that where they just missed me in such a fundamental way and are attacking me, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Like, I recognize this quality of internet hate as it being particularly triggering in the same way. Like I accidentally scrolled, someone sent, or I don't know, what was it? Maybe they sent me a link and Reddit was talking about me slightly, like a small group of people. And I stupidly scrolled down at some of the comments and I saw one of the upvoted comments was, I don't agree with a single word that guy says. So when I see that, it stings a little bit, but it's so ridiculous. It doesn't really get to me because, so out of the literal thousands of hours that I have said a lot of things which aren't particularly controversial, you disagree with literally everything that I've said. That is, even if you just took one of my episodes, the amount of words that I say, even in a 20-minute video, you disagree that my name's Kirk Honda. You disagree that this is a site. You disagree with literally everything. So that doesn't. I mean, it stung a little bit, but it didn't. It doesn't really live in my mind the way that others do. But when I experience what you're going through, it really there was this really noticeable moment of this when I first started blowing up on YouTube, and I was starting to incur a lot more fucking attention.
Sure.
Which meant that there were a lot more YouTube comments. I mean, for years and years and years and years of this podcast, we wouldn't even get a single comment on any of our episodes.
Right.
And maybe we'd get 2.
Yeah.
And they would be pretty uninteresting comments.
Yeah.
or there'd be I remember Sunny Pie would just be always nice to us.
Yeah. You guys are great. And there might be someone like, oh, this isn't for me, or like, I don't get this channel. Whatever.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I was getting tens of thousands of comments on every episode. And anyway, so I recorded this one episode in which I was talking about Darcy, I think. I was reacting to Darcy. And I had a brain fart in the syntax or the words that I was saying. And basically what I ended up essentially verbatim saying, but in context, it didn't really look like that's what I meant. And I certainly did not mean to say it, but I essentially was saying that you have to be abused or harmed beyond a certain level before you can legitimately suffer from PTSD or something like that. So if someone sexually harasses you and you claim to have PTSD, you're wrong.
Right.
I wasn't. I'm saying way too many words in this category.
Yeah.
It was like one word was excluded.
Yeah.
I also kind of flubbed the landing. I was sort of like blah, blah, I was sort of mealy mouth or something, and I reviewed it and posted it, and then Stacy was looking at it after the fact, after it was already posted, and she says, it kind of sounds like you're saying the opposite of, I think, what you're meaning to say.
Yeah.
And so I went into her office and I watched a little clip, and I was like, yeah, but who cares? I mean,
who cares?
People know me, and they know I wouldn't think such a stupid thing. That's atrocious. Everything that I've said, probably literally thousands of things that contradict that. I guess I just had a little bit of a brain fart, or it came out wrong, whatever. And it was even kind of a passing thought. It wasn't like a lecture I was going. Well, the internet in the comment section, like a few, what I'm just going to say, fly-by-night people that didn't know me very well, and some, I don't know what's going on with them, but they decided to really focus on that sentence, and they started really getting up in arms, and there were a lot of upvotes and da-da-da. And so Stacy comes to me again, and she's like,
it's a thing.
We have a problem now. And I'm like, who cares? Like, I guess I made a mistake. Like, if people don't know me, they don't know me. It's sort of like what you would do. And she's like, okay, because she's not a very forceful producer. She's pretty hands off. Maybe a couple weeks later, I don't know, long time. She's like, remember that thing I was telling you about?
Oh no,
it's getting even worse. Like it was already bad. It's 10 times worse now.
And you're like, no, can't be. Come on.
And I'm thinking, what? And so we kind of review it, and I'm thinking, okay, fine. Well, just delete it, because when you upload a video to YouTube, you can't add things, but you can subtract things.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, well, just take out that bit.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So then
he's hiding the truth.
Yeah. And because this is that misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And then another element to this, I don't know if you would say it's part of cancel culture, but it's
assuming ill intent.
Yeah, because it's based on a real thing where, like with Charlie Rose or with Harvey Weinstein, the public persona, or Bill Cosby, is one of being a good person, of being a liked person, of being an open person, a non-criminal. And then you hear about a story and you think, that's an anomaly, or that can't be true. Or maybe another example is like Louis C.K., and you hear a story about how someone claims he was a little creepy once.
Yeah.
And you think, well, based on my experience watching him on TV, Louis C.K. seems like a really good guy, and I'm sure it was a minor thing or a misinterpretation or something. And then through the Me Too movement and other sort of cancellations that were legitimate and justified, we would come to learn that those were the tips of the iceberg. And then we became very attuned to tips of icebergs because we didn't want to be tricked again. A lot of us, this is something that I don't think is talked about a lot. One of the most thanked people at the Oscars is Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
They've taken stats.
Yeah.
I think it's Steven Spielberg and Harvey Weinstein. These people have like hundreds of thank yous at the microphone for winning an Oscar. Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. These were huge figures, and they were, especially people like Bill Cosby, were beloved, right?
Yeah.
And then to learn that this whole time, and maybe we went through a time where we heard the allegations and we denied them, at least internally. We're like, that can't be true. Then we find out they were true, and we feel ashamed. And then we think, I'm never going to be tricked again.
Well, I certainly remember when I first heard about Bill Cosby rumor stuff, I paid it no mind. I'm like, whatever, that's weird. I don't, because it just seemed like so random, out of context. Like, what? No.
Yeah, right. And really all those figures, Michael Jackson.
Well, Harvey Weinstein, I knew who he was, but I had such little, I didn't care at all about him.
Right.
In fact, there was a character in Entourage that was supposed to be like him, and he was an asshole. So I didn't care.
Right.
But all these others, Michael, all these things, absolutely.
Kevin Spacey, for example. Yeah. And so we flipped and said, I will never be tricked again. And so whenever there's the hint of something, I'm just going to assume that it's the tip of the iceberg because I don't want to be tricked again. I think this is a major element.
Yeah.
And also, I want to be on the right side of history. And also, because there's all this talk about tips of icebergs, I'm going to assume that there is a bigger iceberg. And if I have trauma regarding that's similar to that iceberg, like people denying my trauma, for example, then I'm going to feel a certain energy around this.
Right. So they see the tip of the iceberg in your case is that comment.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, obviously that's the tip of an iceberg. And the tip has been removed from the internet on purpose because they're trying to cover up the iceberg.
Right. Yeah. So then the assumptions run away with themselves. And then a whole other faction begins on the internet, on Reddit and beyond, where you have long conversations that span months talking about me, and only me. It's not like a list. It's like they're only talking about me. And from what I can tell, 99% of the people participating in the conversation have never even consumed my content.
Oh, wow.
They've heard an exaggeration and a distortion and possibly literally a delusion that someone has claimed about me. And thousands of people have just taken it as fact and gospel. And then other rumors start to brew. Like, well, I heard this about him. And then that becomes fact. Well, he did this.
Right.
There's a report that he did that. And it just goes out of control.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so when that happened, that is distressing.
Yeah. Well, the small, tiny version of that I saw the most was with the Bill Cosby episode, where, I had made a statement about how I'll stand by the statement, that I didn't think it was productive to try to minimize how big of a comedic figure he was and how good his comedy was and all these things because he was a monster, or to try to minimize it because he's a monster, whatever. I made a comment like that. And it was because we were talking about one of those documentaries, and I was saying, like, part of the documentary, maybe I misunderstood. It made it sound like, well, now we should, in retrospect, not think his comedy was good or something like that. So I made that statement. There was a lot of hate from a specific enclave on the YouTube comments. Like, he's defending Bill Cosby. I can't believe he's So that one really hurt and upset me as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is,
if you want to disagree,
yeah,
which people do, which is fine, just be like, yeah, I don't really see it that way.
Yeah.
But the logical leap from I disagree to he's a proponent of rape.
Right, exactly.
They don't say that directly, but that's
what you're kind of implying.
They're basically saying that.
Yeah.
And if I say something stupid or I say something wrong or you don't like it and you want to disagree with it, then fine. Like that person, I disagree with literally everything that guy says. Okay. But if you make some shit up about me and then
those are the
rally
ones that
a crowd against me based on something that is absolutely false, and you're just convinced, and there's literally nothing I can do to change your mind.
Right.
That's some psychopathic shit.
Yeah. It's possible so to wrap it back around, it's possible that some of what you notice over the years is me just maturing and being a little less like, every point of mine is brilliant, right? Also, yeah, there could be some trauma or built up fear. And in some cases, I'm like, I probably shouldn't say that.
I think you're a little tentative.
Yeah.
Not a lot, just like a slight. Now, when we're doing the neo-Nazi stuff, it requires tentativeness. But again, I was listening to some old episodes, and it just felt like there was zero tentativeness back then. But I feel it today. I don't feel any tentative. And I'm not saying you're wrong or I'm right. I'm just saying if there's a barrier, feel free to disregard if it's an unnecessary, over-hindering barrier. I think the listeners would want that for you. I'm speaking for the listeners.
That's fair. There is one other angle to this or dimension, which is that ever since our big, come to Jesus moment, our big argument. And
Which one?
Well, the big one where we had realizations of like, one thing that I've been paying more attention to is that when I do want to disagree about something, there's the difference between me making a point. I'm like, I don't agree with that, versus I have to prove you wrong. And I have to, like that approach, right? And I'm going to die on this line. I'm never moving it from this line or whatever. Just because I was like that, I did really legitimately have a moment of realization that day where I was like, right. Okay. So yes, and now I don't know how much that factors in, but I know that there's been a couple episodes where in the past I would have tripled down on an argument, and what I instead did, I said, well, okay, I guess I just see it a different way, and then we moved on.
Yeah.
And in the past, I would have been like, no, well, hold on, I still don't think you're getting it.
Don't change that. Keep that one. But no, that's not what I'm talking about at all. It's more like. Now, I will say that if we go, both of us, too far back in history on this podcast, we needed more tentativeness. Because I listened to episodes from the very beginning, not the very, very beginning, but like 2012 kind of time. Yep. And most of those episodes I've taken down just because most of them aren't very good, but also some of the episodes I'm like, whoa, the tone, the tone that we're all having, I'm still the sort of straight man, but the average amount of tentativeness is so askew that all of us are just completely going for it. And I think about how, one, back then the internet was different. It was a lot more of a playground for people like us. It hadn't reached suburbia or the general public. Podcasts in 2012 were, the vast majority of Americans didn't even know what a podcast was.
Yeah, I tell this story often when I'm like, I've been doing a podcast forever now. And they're like, what? Really, back then? And I mention that when you asked me to do this, in my mind, because I was a very techie person, and I had listened to podcasts. In my mind, podcasts were now over at that time. I was like, oh, yeah, that's the RSS feed? You're like, yeah, that's, okay, I guess we could do it, but that's going out. And it was only just starting.
Yeah, I think the stats were 5% of Americans even had heard of what a podcast was. But it was, the internet in general was different. The 4chan and YouTube, it was this little playground. I think the analogy is when I was a kid, me and all of my neighborhood friends, we would play in the woods that surrounded all of our homes and connected. It's sort of like the Force. It connected everything. There were all these trails. Like the majority of the neighborhood was forest, old forest. And we would, because there was no video games or anything.
Oh my gosh, what did you do after watching Return of the Jedi? Did you?
I know.
You might have been a little too old to fully envision what that means in a big forest like that.
Totally. So we would enter the forest because it would be entertaining, climbing trees, making forts, that kind of thing, play, war. But the benefit was also that parents couldn't really navigate the forest because you'd have to trounce through brush and you didn't know your way around. But for us, it was like that, and the internet was like that back then. It was this
undiscovered
it was
country.
it was this playground that parents didn't even know how to access.
That's right.
And it had a different expectation of crassness.
Well, and I was coming from that kind of 4chan kind of, scandal and shock is the value.
Yeah, right. Like I'm reminded when you say that I was motivated because I was always a perfectionist about this podcast, that a part of the mission was to make it as racy as possible. And I depended on like you and Mandy and others to carry that torch. You know?
I came from having liked back then, I'm shamed now, but I liked Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew. Yeah. And I loved that persona that Adam Carolla would play. Like,
well, he was a very different person back then. Yeah. He was a very different person.
But I kind of, in my mind, was modeling a bit after that. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to tell you what I think. You know?
Right. And it's kind of interesting to hear. So I think that there's a sweet spot that I want to, because I went on a similar journey myself after the trial, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, where no matter what sort of content I was making, the words were stopping in my throat because I was worried about having people attack me with literally every syllable that was coming out of my mouth in front of the microphone. I would be planning on making an episode that day, and I would be kind of dreading it.
Right.
And I noticed that and thought, this is not a good sign. What is going on here? And so I had to work really hard on getting safe again, really. Right. I wasn't, I think a typical response is like to deny my feelings and just get over it, but that never works. So what I did is I went on a campaign to connect with the listeners so that they could make me feel safe again.
Nice.
And I would ask, I would say, I don't feel safe anymore. If you could make me feel safe, please, then I will feel better. And two, the content will get back on track, and the listeners were really, really, really good about that. Not just saying you're safe, but they would really put effort into convincing me of that,
One of my favorite fans of all time happens to also be a very good friend, my friend Mark, who listens to the podcast. And every time I see him, he is like, Berto, I love what you do. And he actually is like, I love it because you tell it straight or whatever. So if I need a pick me up in that regard, I could just like call him up and it's like, hey, do you want me to be safe? He'd be like, no.
But earlier we read all those nice comments.
Yeah.
And I hope that helps as well.
Yeah. Well, those are honestly, over the years, that was one thing that when I started hearing those kinds of comments, it validated what I guess I intuitively thought I had as value, which is like, I'm just going to be honest about all these fuck ups I've had, all these things that I've done, and with my journey and blah, blah. And then hearing that it actually brings value, I'm like, all right, well then, damn it. Yes. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. So along those lines, Jocelyn, you're asking, what's the course of being influenced? Let me give my answer to this. I consider it, Jocelyn, to be an extremely interesting question that I haven't really thought about, but I gave it a lot of thought today. And let me just address each of your questions. You say, have you always been comfortable being influenced and guided by your audience? And the answer to that is, yeah, absolutely. Essentially, very early on, I had this Venn diagram in my mind that I tried to determine, assess, and live by, which is that there's an overlap between what I want to do and what the listeners want me to do. Because there's so many things that I want to do, but it would be stupid if I did something content-wise or style-wise that no one wanted to listen to.
Right.
And considering there's so many things within what I want to do, it actually helps to have at least somebody tell me which direction to go.
You know who Jacob Collier is?
Who? No.
He's a musician, very, very like genius kind of musician. One of these guys with perfect pitch, all these things. Anyways, he was recently talking about this because when he started, he got famous on YouTube because he made these videos where he harmonized with himself and all these things. But when he started making music, it was just him in his room, in his house, just making stuff for himself. And he did that for a long time. And now that he's actually kind of matured a bit, grown up and stuff, he was talking about how he gets more out of it now if he knows he's doing it for someone that's going to enjoy it. And so that's interesting.
Right. So I, from day one, pretty much really valued knowing what people wanted. Now, I don't do everything that people tell me to, not even in the least. I mean, I would say out of 100 requests, I probably only do 0.1, honestly, because we get a lot of requests for a lot of different things, whether it's a topic on the audio podcast or a show to watch and react to. Sky's the limit in terms of all the different loves that people have or pet topics that they have, right? Yeah. And so I wish I could address all the things in that sweet spot of the diagram, but pretty much what I do is it's like, well, there's a lot of things in the diagram in the meeting in the middle between what I want to do and what they want to do. And then I try to determine, well, what's an even smaller sliver of what I really want to do and what they really want me to do. Right. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I always think. Then you ask, Jocelyn, how has this evolved from the start of the podcast until now? Well, generally speaking, if I was to just lump the whole podcast into 3 phases, in the beginning, from 2008 to 2015-ish, maybe 7 years, no one was requesting anything, or very few people were. Like, I might get a request or even an interesting email once every 6 months, at maybe a little bit more towards the end of that, but certainly less in the beginning. So I didn't know what anyone wanted, and right. I just tried to figure it out, really, and I guess just lived within what I wanted to do. 2015, we started Patreon because someone suggested it, but it was just another one of those suggestions that I would get.
Yeah.
And I did not think it would pan out in the least.
Who's going to pay? Like, yeah. Come on now.
Or if people did, it would be this small little...
Starbucks money.
Yeah, exactly. But it slowly grew at about the pace of 20 to 30 net new patrons a month,
Right.
And in the beginning, it's like it was pretty overwhelming and very gratifying, but pretty slow if you think about it. It's not like you're overnight making enough money to quit my job at the university or slow down my practice. But what it helped was that it created, and Jocelyn, you gave me a chance to figure this out, it created this feedback loop because I was heavily motivated to serve those particular listeners, right? And they were heavily motivated to tell me what they wanted to do because they're investing money.
Right.
So they were probably more motivated to tell me what they wanted. And I was more motivated to give it. And what this did is it created this building feedback loop where I would listen to them, they would tell me what they wanted, and as I did that, it created better content.
And more attachment for them.
and more, right.
Yeah, because they're like, okay, great. Like, this is what we asked for.
It's a mutual relationship. Yeah. I get something from them and they get something from me. And then more people would join the bandwagon, and then there's more requests, and then I'm doing more things. And it was this powerful generator of quality, really, because it's very noticeable, and it was sort of on purpose. I said, well, if I have paying members now,
right,
then I need to start actually dedicating myself to making quality content. I can't just phone it in like I kind of would do in the past. So that's when the podcast really started to do well. It's kind of this weird thing because I think most people would say, well, you have to create something good before people would pay for it. But in some ways, I created something good because people were paying for it.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And arguably 99% of the sort of deep dives that I've done over that time has been because that's what people asked for. And they happen to reside within that Venn diagram of things that I want to do as well. I mean, there are pet topics of mine that I've been wanting to do from the very beginning, but they get deprioritized because no one really is interested in it.
Oh, right.
Then in 2020, another big kind of chapter begins in the podcast during the pandemic when YouTube blew up. And I was starting to get a completely different set of requests and an exponentially increase in the volume of requests.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There was a time when, for many, many years, I would literally answer either on air or writing back every email I got in detail. I would get an email and I would sit down for 40 minutes and reply, or I would read it on the podcast. And it was this transition time for me where I still held on to that ethic, right? I once I commit myself to something, I don't easily change that. I would commit in my head. I'm going to address every email.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do. And once there was a volume, I still tried to do that for a long time.
Yeah.
And eventually it was so
Too
overwhelming that it just wasn't possible. And so I had to change, and it was a loss. I felt grief and I felt bad. And I'm sure there were some people that were disappointed because they used to always get that and now they weren't. And it did bum me out. So it was a different kind of phase for me where I had to be careful about who was influencing me in that way, or this, how I couldn't just listen to the, sort of like if I were in a crowded room with 30 people and I said, okay, who has a request or who has a question? You're going to get a certain volume and you'll be able to keep up with it and it'll feel mutual. But you add 3,000 people and you say, okay, who has a thing? And you're just getting peppered with stuff.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work.
It's weird because it dilutes the connection to some extent. You have a lot more people, but all the people kind of blend into each other, because in the past, it wasn't really like that. There were people that would bubble up to the surface and would be more noticeable. Jocelyn is actually one of those people.
And I think that's something that the Patreon system still preserves in a way, because you have tiers and you don't have infinite patrons. You have it's a larger, but still a limited set compared to the number of people that might watch a video or comment on a video.
But on YouTube, in a given month, I can't remember the stats exactly, but I think in a given month, we might have literally 1 million individual viewers.
Right.
1 million individual humans that will.
So even if if 10% of those sent you an email, it's 100,000.
Or 1%.
Yeah. 10,000 emails.
So it really changed that relationship and the way it felt for me. Obviously, it's a net positive, but there's a loss there. And what I try to retain is that relationship with, a few dozen people that are very noticeable. Jocelyn being one of them, by the way.
I think it helps that you tell me because from my perspective, it feels like the YouTube content, I know we put a lot of our stuff there, but more like the reaction content and that audience, there is an overlap, but it's not exactly the same audience.
Right.
So also the expectations weren't there from the start, let's say.
Yeah, there are people that are, again, Venn diagramming on both, but there are people that only listen to audio podcasts, and there are people who only watch my videos. Maybe occasionally they dip across the line, but
well, and I noticed. I remember the first, because the folks that came on board really quickly, and then they would listen to one of our episodes. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Right. Because by then, if I've published 2 episodes a day, they're very familiar with my rhythm and who I am. And then
this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife.
But overall, in terms of influence, I really depend on people telling me what to do and what they're interested in. Like, we polled the patrons about deep dives, and the next on the list that they voted for, after the neo-Nazis, is Josh Powell and Elon Musk. So I'm glad to do those things because they're within the Venn diagram, but I wouldn't have intuited those were the 2 things, or the top 3 things on the Patreon poll would be neo-Nazis, Elon Musk, and Josh Powell. I love that we're doing those things, but if I were shooting in the dark, I wouldn't have chosen any of those three. I would have chosen something completely different. I recently reacted to or reviewed this story. Have you heard of Who the Fuck Did I Marry? Have you seen this? So there's a woman who's this TikTok sensation, internet sensation. I think she's coming up on potentially 1 billion views, like in a month or something. Anyway, I think at this point she's 500 million views on TikTok, and she has this 50-part. She has 50 TikToks where she, over time, tells this really interesting story about meeting this guy, marrying him, and all the problems that he presented in terms of his behavior. And I would never have even heard about this if a lot of people from various different vectors, whether it was patrons or listeners or YouTube watchers or YouTube members or people on Instagram or whatever, saying, you got to cover this thing. And where I'm at right now is I'm either pulling the paying members, whether it's the members of YouTube or the patrons, and saying, you choose, and whatever wins, I'll do next, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It all goes back to 2015. Yeah. It's like it creates that feedback loop. It's like, I don't know what to do, and if there's something that you could point me in the direction it could help, and it'll benefit you because
you get what you want.
It's what you wanted, and you're paying, so you deserve that, and it might actually help to grow this community of paying people because there's that trust that is built, and it just feels smaller in scale, which emotionally could feel better. But then outside of those two Venn diagrams, I suppose, there's this other influence vector, which is people, like with Love is Blind, I'm always going to watch that. People don't have to ask. But there's a lot of other possibilities, and I never would have watched or never would have reviewed the story, Who the Fuck Did I Marry, unless I had received enough of these random requests. It was similar with, what was the twin flame thing? And it's kind of random. It's sort of like the mood I'm in, and it's also what Stacy will tell me, because sometimes she'll tell me, you're getting a lot of requests for X, Y, or Z. And we don't really have a system there. So if you're listening to this and you want to, if you want me to be your trained monkey, then you want to come at me from various angles, like email and comments and DMs and you want a lot of different people doing that over the span of a short amount of time, like a week or two. It was same with Ruby Frankie. Like I wasn't going to follow that story, but I just got so many different requests. And I'll tell you, because I get so many requests and I don't really have an easy way of cataloging those of like, let's count every single time. I don't really have a way to do that. So it's just a felt sense. It's weird. It's like certain requests will hit a critical mass. Like if I get a certain request, usually I'll remember it for 2 seconds and then it's gone because, I get probably thousands of individual requests a day. But if I get another request, I'll be like, oh, I think did I hear that before? And then I get another request, and then I get another request, and then Stacy comes to me, and I'm still not at the point where I'm going to do it because I'm just like, well, I don't really have the time. But when it starts to pile up,
yeah.
Like Who the Fuck Did I Marry? It piled up to such a degree that I was like, well, now I got to do this, and I want to. You know what I mean? I'm just like, now I'm intrigued because why are so many people asking me to do this? Like at first I thought, I get a lot of requests. And then later on, I'm like, I'm getting like some repeat requests. But then at some point, I'm like, well, now I got to do it because I'm personally curious now.
I don't remember. I think it's Stephen King, some famous writer. I think it's Stephen King. He was saying how he doesn't have like, when an idea comes to his head, he doesn't like have a little notepad to write it down. Because his philosophy is, if it's important or good enough, it'll keep coming up. And when something comes up enough, that's an idea worth writing about or something like that. I'm probably butchering the whole thing. But it's interesting.
I've heard that.
I wish I could operate like that with music, but I can't.
I don't think it translates to music.
I don't think so, because and I'm sure you've experienced this. There have been some heartbreaking moments where I had this beautiful thing, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, but I got to go to bed. I'll remember it.
Oh,
forever gone. And I try to do it. I'm like, I think it was, no, that's not it. But I think it was, no, that's not it.
No.
So nowadays, like, I voice record everything.
Yeah, I've been doing that since I first started writing in high school.
Yeah.
I still have recordings, little snippets that I recorded on my boombox in 1988. And in my mind, I one day will
get back
finish that song. I have thousands and thousands. There's like half-written or almost completed songs you and I worked on.
Yeah.
Like there's this one that I wrote called Sapphire Sally that we were gonna do, and I just sort of dropped it, and it's kind of interesting. It's like that song's basically done, and anyway. All right, so I'm just chiming in here as I'm editing this episode. I thought I would bother you with this very rough draft of mine that I'm referring to. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts and they refer to something, I wish that someone would just drop it in, and I'm really appreciative of when they do, you know? So I don't know if you care about this, but this is a very, very rough draft. I programmed some beat into my drum machine and then played a very rough guitar part and sang a lyric, a melody. But the words that I'm saying are not, they don't make any sense, because when I write music, I almost never write lyrics first. It's usually the very last thing that I do. And it's sort of like with Paul McCartney when he wrote Yesterday. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Paul McCartney, but in this way I am, that he called Yesterday Scrambled Eggs, because I don't think he had words initially. You know, it was like, scrambled eggs, and and you just as a working title have this thing. So I figured eventually the song would be about someone named Sapphire Sally, and I think I did end up writing lyrics. But anyway, this is a very silly song. It's just me pressing record and playing it, and then in a second I'll play a rough draft of a collaboration that Humberto and I started but never finished.
You are my sun and moon and stars. I will burn apart. I will find a sun and moon, and I will come apart. You're mine, all mine, all mine, all mine. Hello, Sapphire Sally, who could fall apart? Hello, Sapphire Sally, I could come apart. You could break my heart, and I would see your body apart at the seams, at the seams.
Okay, it's just a rough draft, so, but I just thought, since I talked about it, and this just represents countless, maybe thousands of little snippets, ideas that Humberto and I have that we've recorded and then just forgot about or neglected or decided not to work on or something. But the other thing is, I'm noticing as I was just listening to it right now, I think I was really into the Game of Thrones quote in which Daenerys and Khal Drogo will talk about you are my moon and my stars. I think it's how it goes, and you can hear that coming out of me in the beginning of that. I'm like, you are my sun and moon and stars. Da 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 da. Like I must have been thinking about that quote from the books. So we collaborated in a lot of different ways, but with this collaboration, the way it was configured was that I had written and recorded a rough draft of a musical bit, and then I sent it to him and then asked him to write lyrics and a melody over it, and then he sent that back to me. So all the music is what I did, and then he sent it back to me with him singing over it. So let's listen to that.
They don't care that we're on our own. They're just spinning alright. Who do we think we are? It's all they wanna know. Then they got us out the door. We condescending goodbye.
geez, when I listen back to that, I think, why didn't we finish that song? I mean, it's not completed, but it's I don't know. I like it. And, this is what plagues me and Humberto. We don't have a lot of time to dedicate to our music because all of the other things in life. And I guess this pertains, to what we're talking about in this episode. And I don't know. I just wish that I had 10 other lives and I could spend one of them just making sure that I complete all these. But, I just come up with more ideas that I wouldn't be able to finish. But anyway, getting back to the episode. But yeah, it wouldn't work with music because if you just relied on your gut, you would end up writing in the same exact groove for every song.
Yeah.
Often the bits that intrigue us the most are at the edge of our groove, right?
Yeah.
And you could argue that Stephen King is just being lazy, and guess what? His stories tend to be pretty similar.
I see.
And if he wrote down some of the inspirations, he might actually spread his wings a little bit. You know what I mean?
Could be.
Okay, final thing here. So I recently wanted, because I'm looking at emails, and I tend to prioritize like upper tier emails. But then I start thinking, well, even if you're the lowest tier, if you've been a patron for a long ass time, you definitely take priority, maybe even over upper tier patrons,
right?
Because you've been with us the whole time, and you've probably contributed on it, overall,
a lot of loyalty,
more than most other people. Plus, if you liked us back then,
right,
when no one else was, or very few,
OG,
then I want to, at the very least, know you, and also answer your emails, prioritize your emails, or at the very least see your emails, because that's another thing, because I can't even literally even see every email. And so I added this item on the email form that says, if you're a long-term patron, and I define it as 3+ years, which isn't super long,
sure,
but you'd be surprised like how many of our listeners are within the last 3 years, And, I love it. If you've been around for 1 week, you're just as valuable as anybody else.
Right.
But it's a thing to actually meet people that, sometimes people will email in and they'll be like, I've been a listener since 2016, and it just feels like, oh my God, you must really like us, because if you've stuck through all of the phases and the ups and the downs and you're still listening, my goodness. And for me, there's very few podcasts that I will listen to for that long a period. And those podcasts are very dear to me. It's TBTL, This American Life, and Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. I've been listening to those 3 things since 2007 at least, if not going back to 2005 or something. Anyway, and so, I want to know. So anyway, I also made a call for people like, hey, if you've been around a long time, I want to know you're still here. Because I began to assume at a certain point that all the old fans had left us.
Right.
I don't know why. It just kind of felt that way.
You guys changed, man.
Or you just get bored. You're just like, it's run its course. And so I was just curious. And so Alex from Portland wrote in, and he says, hi, Kirk Humberto. I just wanted to let you guys know that I've been listening since 2012.
Oh my God.
So earlier, I was talking about,
oh my God,
I was talking about how unhinged to some extent we were back then, how shaggy and on the edge we were.
Yes.
So he was listening. Yeah, that'd be
crazy.
I think that's potentially even before Mandy. I think that would be Jody, maybe. I'm not sure. But at the very least, like
2012,
Mandy
wow.
was the third, co-host during that time, and going on. Back then, I had a job verifying petition signatures.
That sounds real.
And you two kept me company. Can you imagine just like verifying signatures?
Yeah,
it's like so mind-numbingly boring. And I've been a loyal listener ever since. I've probably listened to 80% of your episodes.
Oh my gosh.
Some multiple times.
That's crazy.
I know.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Insane.
I know. And then he also says, I'm not a stalker, I promise. So this gets back to that thing with the other people there.
I'll pay you, but I'm not a stalker.
I'm not a stalker. It's like, no. I don't think of anybody as a stalker.
We don't start with the assumption that you're a stalker.
Yeah. I mean, you could be very into this podcast and a loyal listener for a long time. There's a massive chasm between that and me being afraid of you.
The fact that you've listened to us for this long and all the episodes and stuff, but we had never encountered you or received a threatening letter from you means by definition you're not a stalker.
And then he ends with, thanks for making the world a better place. So I actually looked him up on Patreon, and
you're a stalker.
I'm pretty sure we've interacted with Alex a number of times, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, you would imagine.
But he has actually been a patron nonstop.
That's incredible.
For 8 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So touching.
Yeah. So that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. This episode's for you, Alex from Portland. And please take care of yourself and everybody else too, because
you deserve it.